Welcome to the Let's Get Chemical podcast, a podcast made by chemical engineers for chemical engineers, in which we talk with alumni and other guests who work in the world of chemical engineering about their experiences, their jobs, and other hot topics in the industry. First of all, some public service announcements. Through Alembic promotional channels, we will try to announce podcasts beforehand and allow you to send in questions. If you want to be part of the podcast or have a strong opinion on which topics we should talk about or should be discussed, please let us know. My name is Frizo. I'm a 24-year-old chemical engineering student here at the UT. And as you might remember, last episode was with Bob Hengelveld, who currently works at the government and lives in Utrecht. If you haven't listened already and want to know more about Bob and his study time and everything about him, then you can find the episodes on YouTube, on the Alembic website, and on Spotify. For today's episode, we will remain close to home, and we have a guest currently living in Enschede, Thomas Brouwer.
Hello.
Dear Thomas, could you maybe give a small introduction about who you are and what you do?
Yes, of course, Friso, thanks. Well, I'm Thomas Brouwer. I'm already 31 years old, so I'm a little bit young still, I hope. To introduce myself, I did also my studies here, so bachelor, master, and also was stupid enough to do the PhD, but let's go into that more detail later. So I did my chemical engineering studies here, did also a board here at Alembic. I was the 48th board, so you can do the math backwards.
10 years back.
And also did a year at the Umbrella Association, so the OS. Also did a year there, which I really like because then you have a nicely complementary skill set. Besides going into depth with the CT study, but also do some organizational skills and meet a lot of different people from other studies. Yeah, and then after my studies, so I did my master assignment at Professor Brouwer. And halfway during my master assignment, he told me, well, I really see you as a very nice PhD candidate. So I had to think about it for about 5 minutes, and I said, yes, why not? And 5 years later, I got my diploma, unfortunately during Corona crisis. So I did not do the ceremony, but yeah, of course, it's fine. And after that, I started working at HoSt, and that's where I'm now still.
Nice.
That was shortly my life story.
Awesome. It's funny because when you were telling about your study time here, the board years you did and everything, it reminded me of how much we have similar, as me also have done a board year at Alembic, also board year at OS, same dispute, stuff like that.
Also, yes.
Yeah. Awesome to hear that. Yeah. And out of those things like bachelor, master, PhD, is there one memory that basically tells you like, oh, this was my study time, this was the height of my study time?
Well, I think there are different highlights during my studies. It's, of course, if you go into the diplomas itself, of course, getting your propedeuse, which we had back then, was a nice achievement. And then your bachelor diploma, your master diploma, it's always a very nice reward for all your hard work, of course. Those are milestones. But I think what will be my most dearest memory is my time at Alembic, because Alembic is a very small association, so you always know quite a lot of people. You know them all, and just meeting all the other students from my year, I think that's the most dearest memory I have, because nowadays we still see each other quite often. So we went last year to each other's weddings. We still help each other move around the country. So just meeting, getting to know like-minded people, let's say. I think that's the dearest memory I have.
Awesome. Nice. Okay, so yeah, about your PhD, what was it about specifically? If we take that topic right now, because a lot of our listeners are already in their masters, maybe looking into a PhD. So what was your PhD about?
Yeah, so my PhD, as I said, I did it under Brouwer, and also Sascha Kester, by the way, at the Sustainable Process and Technology Group. And my research was really broadly defined. The title was solvent-based affinity separation. So I think 90% of people say, what is that? In the essence, it means you study how molecules interact with each other. And then you start at the molecular level. How do they interact? And then you see what are the implications at the process level. So in the end, I wanted to know beforehand if I want to separate chemical A from chemical B, which kinds of solvent do I need to reduce the energy requirements. So in the end, it was all about saving costs in the chemical industry, saving CO2 emissions. And as an added criterion, I also added that my solvent needs to be bio-based. So it needs to be also a sustainable solvent. And in this way, I could impact all facets of the process industry.
And that criteria you added for yourself. That
I
was
added
not
for myself,
okay.
yes. Because the chemical industry is not a very old or not a very new industry. It's very old, and the most things already are being thought of or have been examined or already used. And bio-based solvents is something quite new because they now really see that it is a benefit. It's better for the environment. And I saw that as a trend, and I say, well, I need to do something with it. So I included it myself into my PhD assignment. And luckily, my promoters also thought it was a good idea. And so nowadays I have a couple of patents about these processes. So they are still really being done in the industry or being considered for the industry.
Okay, cool. So you actually had quite a few actual breakthroughs.
Well, I think so. And the company who now has the patent also thinks so. So it's quite nice. And also, but it's also a very different way of thinking about your research, because it's not like we have a very specified article or something that only another PhD student will read, for instance. But this is in patent, so you have to formulate your thought processes like someone who reads it as an engineer or also as a lawyer, because it's a legal document. So it was a steep learning curve to write that.
Nice. So if you compare your PhD to the industry, what are the main takeaways for you?
Well, the main takeaways, or let's say the main differences, it's about, there are a couple of things. So first thing, in PhD, it can be quite lonely because it's your subject. You have to dive into the subject, and of course you have fellow PhD students and your promoters to help you along. But at the end, it's your task. And in industry, you will never have a task alone. You always have colleagues. You have a team. You have to go to a shared target. So I think this is one of the main things I really like about being in a company, because you will always have a team around you. It's not like I didn't like my PhD, of course, but it's like comparing apples and oranges.
Fair enough. But even with comparing apples and oranges, they're both round. So let's say, are there any things you learned during your PhD that you still use nowadays in the industry?
Every day. Well, what you really see is, because if you do a PhD, it's an extension towards your master assignment. So all the aspects you learn during your master, you keep on repeating during your PhD. So in the end, you have 4 years more experience in all those topics. And if you go to a company, you immediately can tell that your experience level of the really fundamentals of your chemical industry, it's much more easier for you. You can see very directly, okay, this is something which has potential, or this is something not, because people are forgetting maybe some aspects. So every day I can really tell that, don't spend time on this subject, or do really spend time on that subject.
Okay. And are there also things you would say like, yeah, I never use these again? Or is it like everything you did during your PhD you still use nowadays?
Oh, that is a good question. There are some things I don't use anymore because it's not worthwhile for a company. Because part of my PhD work was doing fundamental thermodynamics, modeling equation of states, and this is what I really like. I find it interesting. Most people don't, but I found it interesting. But in a company, they don't care. They say, make a rough estimation. If it's 10% off, it doesn't really matter, because we do include, of course, a safety margin. So if I have to say something, I miss the really complicated, detailed modeling, just to figure out what is the exact way to do everything. But in a company, they say, well, give me a ballpark. It's fine with me.
Yeah, so you missed the perfectionism that you basically use in your PhD.
Sometimes, not always.
I can imagine. Well, if we now focus more on your working life, how is it to work in Enschede? Because a lot of people move out to different parts of Netherlands. We talked about it before the podcast. The chemical industry is big in the north, it's big in the south, and you have the Randstad. So why did you choose to stay here?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first reason was that my wife and me liked to stay in the east because we both grew up here. I'm from Deventer and she's from Zwolle. And our families are also here. So we prefer to stick close to family. But then still, if you draw a line of 50 kilometers around all the towns, then you can still have a pretty wide net within the Netherlands. But in the end, we looked around and it was luckily that she got a pretty early on already a job here in Enschede. So I focused my searching area a little bit more closely here. Yeah, and then something popped up here in Enschede. And in the end, we really like it here because as a student, you get to learn Enschede from a student perspective. But if you are really just as a civilian, you see another side of Enschede, and you see that Enschede is pretty great, really. It has the comfiness of a town, let's say a little town, but there's so much going on here. And being close also to the university, close to the students nowadays, I really like both sides of the coin.
Okay. What surprised you the most about as a civilian Enschede, to put it like that? Because I only know the student life with going out, the city center, stuff like that, but more the nightlife. But what surprised you the most?
What surprised me the most is that also, let's say, the evening life in Enschede, not the nightlife, but the evening life is also quite vibrant because we really like to go out for dinner. And every year there are some new restaurants popping up here. And then you can check it out, and there are festivals around here. There's really a lot going on. And that's what also surprised me, because I lived on the campus for maybe 7 years or something. And then your view of Enschede can be quite limited. If you only go to the city center at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's a different city.
Yeah. And working in Enschede itself, like, do you go to work by bike or by car or?
No, we bike every day.
Your wife as well to her work?
Yeah. We both work at the Kennis Park. So as her company is 2 blocks further. So it's quite nice. So we bought a house in our first year immediately at the south of Enschede, and it's a little bit more than 50 minutes by bike.
Oh.
So every morning we can nicely bike together and bike back. So it's very nice, and it's really. I enjoy it because in the morning you can clear your head a little bit, get a nice fresh air, and also going back so you don't take your work back home. And I think if you every day you need to go by car and you sit in a traffic jam, and then I think it will not be so nice. So I really like going by bike.
Fair enough. Also when it rains, or?
Depends on how how heavy it rains. I would have said that I will go by bike then, but in the car it's very attractive.
Fair enough. Well, if we now take a bit more a step back from Enschede, so quite a distance actually, and also a step back from working life, I learned that you did your internship in Cape Town. How was that?
It was an experience. Now, my first requirement of an internship was I wanted to do it outside of the Netherlands. I wanted to go somewhere. I didn't really care about what my internship was about. I wanted to have it in a nice, different country. And then my chairman, up my board, of course, he told me at one day at the Bolkelder, I arranged an internship in Cape Town. I said, well, that's quite interesting. Give me the contacts and I will also arrange it. So then we both went there. So we bought a car there. So he was, I think, 3 months before me, and then it was like an estafette. I don't know exactly what the English word for it is.
A relay?
A relay, yeah. And so we did a car relay. So he bought the car and I sold the car. No, but it's very nice because it was a very different culture, of course, and a very different atmosphere. And my internship was about commissioning a palladium membrane system to purify syngas and to get water or hydrogen out of it. So this is, now I think about it, quite nice because I work at a company which do about the same. So that's that's cool. No, but working with them, it's very different because we are Dutchies, where if you are 1 minute late to a meeting, then you have 5 missed calls, for instance. And there, it doesn't really matter. It will get done. Doesn't matter when. So it's nice. And I had there a couple of friends there also who were Afrikaans. So you can really nicely go to experience the country itself and not stick to the touristic sites.
Okay, it's funny to hear that you also did your internship abroad, because Bob did that as well. He did it in San Francisco, and he also had the mindset of, I just want to go outside of the Netherlands.
Yeah, because you want to experience different cultures, and if you stick to the Netherlands, we say that we are all different, but in the end, we're pretty much the same.
Nice, nice. So you were so far away for your internship, and now you're literally stay in the same city. What are the main differences and similarities between the two?
Well, sticking close to home or close to university, it means that the general atmosphere between all the Twentenaren is about the same. Everybody has the same down-to-earth mentality. Just do the things. Don't talk too much. Just do it. Be a little bit humble. Not shouting from the roofs. We are the best and we are the greatest. But be honest and say, well, we can do it pretty good. There's some things we to consider, and in the end, then you see, well, okay, maybe we are the best, but you never say that. And for instance, if you go to Cape Town, they will shout from the roofs, oh, we can do this. And in the end, you say, well, we didn't do anything. So yeah, there's all the small differences.
Confidence levels.
Well, not confidence, but more like how mouthy you are, how much you're shouting instead of doing it. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's my wrong image, but this was a little bit what I picked up nowadays.
Okay, nice. So you work at HoSt or Bright actually. Could you maybe first tell us what HoSt and Bright are as
Yes.
companies? What they do for those who don't know?
All right. Now, HoSt is as a company who is a little bit over 30 years old now. It's still a family-owned company. So it's now taken over by the son of the founder. So it's the second generation. And Herman Klein-Teesling, who founded HoSt, has a very good foresight, I think, because in the 90s, nobody was talking about sustainability. Nobody thought, well, let's reduce our gas consumption because gas is getting expensive. No, back then it was, almost free. So he started up a little bit of a consultancy department, and who was a joint venture between Holek and Stork. Those are back then and maybe nowadays still a big company. And he started out doing consultancy work, just going to factories, to companies, and say, well, this is how you can save a lot of money by just optimizing your system. And that went on for a while, and in the end, Herman thought, well, I'm giving a lot of advice to people, but I can do it also very good on my own. So he bought his department out and he privatized it, and this is how HoSt started. Just getting all this information to what they already had from all those consultancy firms and building their own systems. And in the end, HoSt is into the bioenergy. It's HoSt Bioenergy Systems. And bioenergy systems can be seen in two categories. We always say the hot and the cold side. The hot side is if you have all those garbage, waste wood, for instance, you can burn it. If you burn it in a very efficient way, you can get a lot of steam out of it. You can make electricity, you have heat. And if you build this next to, for instance, greenhouses, you can supply the greenhouse with a lot of heat, with power to grow the plants. So that was the first thing. And the other thing is the cold side. And the cold side is if you push all the organic waste in a large concrete container, cap it with a roof, membrane roof, and then you can collect all the biogas because it will rot, it will ferment. And all this biogas, if you capture it very nicely, you can either burn it again in a gas motor. For instance, you can do it again in your greenhouses. Then again, you have water and heat and steam. So this is how we started. And for decades, we built biodigesters, CHP plants. And it was a certain point that Herman thought, well, we are burning a lot of biogas, but the biomethane, what's in the biogas, is also very valuable because biogas is nothing more than CO2 and methane. So what we then did was we worked together with, again, the university, so the membrane department here, and the membrane supply. So we said, well, we need to make a membrane which can very efficiently separate CO2 from the methane. And so the university thought of the very nice membrane, and we have found a manufacturer who could produce a lot of membranes. And we said, okay, we will make sure that we have a very nice system, in a nice container. It's modular, that we can place this system everywhere around the world. Yeah, I think 2006 was the first one. Don't pinpoint me on the correct year. And then we built the first installation, and then the company skyrocketed. So the first installation was built under the name HoSt, but at the end it was so many systems were in demand. And then we said, okay, we will make a different name for it, because it's a very different kind of project, because we don't engineer, procure, and construct these things. No, we engineer it only once on the most efficient way, and then we repeat. And then we said, okay, we market it as Bright. And Bright Biomethane was the first name. So this is how the interplay between HoSt and Bright is. HoSt is the parent company, and Bright is daughter. So we started with only biomethane, but then we go, let's say, 5 years back, a little bit before I started at the HoSt, is that, well, we also have a lot of CO2 in our systems, of course, because we separate the CO2 from the biomethane, and CO2 is already also pure. Let's capture that. Capture the CO2, liquefy it so you can store it. And because CO2 itself is a very important gas. You could do it in your fizzy drinks, in your beer, of course. Again, you can also put it back into the greenhouses, and the plants will grow more. So then we now also liquefy the CO2. We liquefy, of course, the methane, so for LNG. And also, and this is where my partial job is do the carbon capture. So we also have the chimneys from the CHP engines from the facilities. Just get the flue gases into our system, get the CO2 out of it, and we have pure CO2 again. So we are now moving from a very biomethane-based company also to a CO2 company, because we think CO2 is as important as the methane. So this is a little bit how it works. And then for the very last update is since this year we also have a hydrogen producing company in our portfolio. It's called HyGear. HyGear is based in Arnhem. And they are a world leader in small hydrogen producing systems, also in the containers. And we thought, well, this is a very nice complement to our systems, because if you combine hydrogen with CO2, you get methane again. So this is how we integrate all these kinds of technologies and maximize methane production, or maybe methanol production, or everything what's renewable, we are in it.
Okay.
So very short, this is how HoSt is.
That's interesting. Those last parts you mentioned about the pure CO2 and the pure hydrogen gas also made me think of a research currently done by Tim van Schagen here as a PhD at TUT, where he is developing a logic reactor, as it's called, the liquid out gas in concept reactor by Wim Brilman, where they make methanol from CO2 and hydrogen gas. Is that also something that could be in the future for HoSt/Bright?
Yeah, definitely. Yes. We are currently also have already people dedicated for this development. Because we also see we are now mature in the CO2 market. We can do it. We have proven our technology, and we can capture CO2. We can liquefy CO2. But in the end, also, it's at a certain point the CO2 market gets saturated. What do you do with so much CO2? And then we made also the same analysis many other people made. Well, there's a couple of chemicals which are very valuable, not only as fuel, but as a chemical feedstock, and that was methanol. And it also helps that my colleague Martin Bos also did his PhD at the same research group, which was the predecessor of Tim.
Okay.
So we have a lot of knowledge in-house about doing the synthesis to methanol. But yeah, we are on a short term, or a little bit medium short term,
medium term,
medium term. We're also going into that, because I think we know that is the future of the renewables.
That's cool. So there's a really bright future, pun intended.
Exactly. now you know where the name comes from.
Nice. So how is the company culture there? Since it's a family-owned company still.
It's a very flat culture. That is advantages and disadvantages, of course. But advantages, to give an example, because we are a fast-growing company, or the number of people grow is easier than growing a building. So what happens then is, of course, course, you go from fixed office spaces to flex office spaces, and you work partially at home. So there's a lot of flexibility. But up to a couple of weeks ago, I was sharing my office with the CTO of the entire group. And when he was off, then maybe sometimes an intern was sharing my office, or some commissioning engineer. And otherwise, the CEO was in my office. People don't care what your function is. Everybody's the same. Everybody is working together. It doesn't really matter how long you are at the company, if you're young or old. It doesn't really matter. And all the lines are very small. People will never say, well, I have to talk to my manager because then he can talk to his manager. It's like, no, because then you're already at the top. We don't have so much much layers. And it's easier just to walk into the office and say, well, I have a question, or I have a comment, or I have something else. So it's very informal, and that's something I really liked and still like at HoSt.
A bit like Alembiek is.
Yeah, exactly. You can say because the board members are always approachable. Maybe the RVA, Council of Advice, is it? I don't know.
Advisory Council, yeah.
Advisory Council. Those are often, let's say, the old members, the old grumpy students, and they are still very approachable, and it's the same at HoSt.
Okay. And as an engineer, it's a very big part of HoSt, but what type of engineers do you have? What do they do on a day-to-day basis? Is it always the same? Does it change for you, for example? Are you always doing exactly the same, or does it change depending on the project you're working on?
It changes every day. I think if you see from the background, the majority of people working at HoSt are mechanical engineers and chemical engineers. Of course, you have some electrical engineers and automotive engineers. But in the end, it all comes back to a technical study, a technical engineer. And every day is different because we do a lot of projects. Most engineers will do projects. And we like always to keep our project as standard as possible because then you reduce the amount of engineering hours. But if you go to a site, if it's in the Netherlands or America or Australia, it doesn't really matter. Everything is different. So you always need to think very practically. How can I tie in my process with what's already on site? So it requires a lot of creativity, checking, and see simple things like, will my gas flow not too fast through my pipe? Or if at night the temperature drops to -10, will not all my gases freeze to the surface? There's ice formation. So every project has its different other variable
situation
challenges, problems. Well, challenges. And also it depends, of course, on your function. Because for myself, I'm also an R&D engineer, so I'm more into long-term projects, new ideas. I'm less to do with projects. If they call me in a project, then there's something really a challenge. So no, every day is different.
Okay, awesome. So we're changing topics quite a bit. Also with the next question, which is also a very hot topic and also something we will discuss partly next episode. But do you feel that the universities in the Netherlands should cut the ties with companies that they deem non-sustainable? Should they not focus on research output rather than trying to dictate industry forms? Or starting with the first question, maybe split it up. So do you think that universities should cut the ties with non-sustainable companies?
I think that's a very emotional idea. But if you think about it rationally, I should not do that. And the reason is behind this. I can understand people who are saying this. They say, well, for instance, the oil companies are very damaging for the environment. Please cut ties with them and don't consider them on universities. I can see that. It's a very emotional response because if you don't think about it and really speak from your heart, okay, it's fine. But if you start to think about it and be rational, it's a very, very wrong idea because in the end, we're in the chemical industry, and molecules are molecules. It doesn't really matter if they come from fossil sources or sustainable sources. Let's say methane is methane, CO2 is CO2. And all these oil companies, for instance, have a tremendously amount of experience, knowledge about how to do these processes and in the most optimal way. So they have 100 years of experience in optimizing those systems. But why do you want to throw away that experience and knowledge for an emotional response? We need those oil companies because they have the capacity to invest. And as you now also see, is those companies invest the most in the sustainable industry. So I understand the response, but I think if you really are logical and rational, it's not a good idea.
Would you then say that it is that universities should maybe push those non-sustainable companies more towards finding solutions for pollution, or just let them decide their own research?
Of course,
support that.
I think as a university, you can of course say, well, we have professors in the sustainability. We don't have professors in the oil. So I think that is already a strong argument.
Yeah.
And also all the research groups have funding, either from the companies or always also from universities or from governments. And those funding will never be into optimizing fossil fuels. They will always be towards alternatives, energy reduction. So in the end, there are a lot of processes already in play which dictate or guide the research output towards sustainability. So I think in the end, the markets will go into that direction.
Okay. I'm also really curious how this conversation will pan out next week, because it's a very interesting view you give. It's a view that if you think rationally, it makes the most sense, like that, to not cut the ties.
Yeah, but in the end, of course, this is from an engineer perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't want to sound too negatively towards the people who have that response, because if you don't know what's happening in the chemical industry and you only look and read in the newspapers or on the social media websites, yeah, of course you can have an emotional response. Everybody has a response. I also have an emotional response, but I can balance that with my knowledge and rational thinking, and that's not everybody's cup of tea.
Fair enough. I've been asking you quite a lot of questions over the last 45 minutes, so maybe reverse it. Do you still have questions for me? Because we actually reached the end of the episode already.
Oh, I expected a lot of questions, but not this question.
Well, okay, well, let's maybe do that first. Do you have, what kind of questions did you expect besides this question?
No, I think you figured it quite. Yeah, I figured out these questions a little bit, luckily. No, because in the end, I thought of how do I see myself working towards a better future, a brighter future. And I don't have I don't think that I will make a big impact, of course not. But if I only make a very little bit of a dent in the fossil fuel industry, for instance, and make a little bit of a bump into the sustainable future, then I'm happy. So this were the topics you also covered, and of course Alembic. Alembic was more than 10 years part of my life, and still part of my life because I'm still going to the drinks here. So, but to bounce back the question, do you have now a very nice idea about what HoSt is doing and what we are trying to do in the world?
I would say so. And mainly the sustainability focus on that has really stuck with me. I think I understand a little bit what HoSt does now.
Oh, that's great.
What Bright does, High Gear does.
Yeah, well, in the end, we are nowadays quite a lot of large company, and we always have a lot of interns and students with us, because the market is developing very quickly, and we have to keep up. And we are keeping up, and we do that by, I think at all times we have about 15 interns walking around at Bright, HoSt, but also High Gear, and every year we have two moments in the spring and in the autumn that we hire new students as interns or working students who can work, let's say, 1 day a week at us. So for you and also all the listeners, if you want to have a very nice informal internship or graduation internship in Enschede, but also in Arnhem, of course, because in the High Gear office, please go to our website, just Google us, and you will see a lot of internships. And if you have an idea by yourself or an internship online is not really your cup of tea, still contact us. We will always think about new assignments, and there's always enough to do to go for a nicer future.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas, for being our guest and for having this awesome conversation with you.
Oh, a
I
pleasure.
hope you enjoyed it as well. We will let you know when the episode is out. It will be out on YouTube, on Spotify, and of course the On the Beak website. And again, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.